All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. It's so great to see all of you here tonight. Can you join me in just saying thank you to our band? Because what a way to start worship tonight. What a way to come in from the cold to be able to sing praises to God. And it doesn't hurt. That is some of the best musicianship that you're going to find anywhere. And we get to come and just hear it and worship and participate in it here. And I don't know, but I think that's pretty cool. So it's really great. Welcome to worship night, everybody. My name is Amanda Neppl. I'm one of the pastors here at the West Des Moines campus. I just want to continue to extend the welcome to you tonight. I'm so proud of you. You're so hardy, all of you, bundling up and getting out there and, just dealing with the fact that it's Iowa and it's winter. And just super proud of you. Tonight, we are continuing on with our sermon series that we started here at the beginning of the year, and we are asking first order questions. We're taking the questions that all of you seem to ask kind of repeatedly and that we hear a lot. And so we're taking a look at one week by week, which the question of the week is what the podcast is going to be based on. By the way, you heard Mel Matthews, our Alpha and Prayer Minister, talking a few minutes ago about the podcast. Excuse me. So it's going to be based, like the question we're talking about today is what the podcast will be about on Wednesday. So it'll be kind of like what we did for when we did the whole Holy Bible in a year. It'll kind of be like that. I invite you to check that out wherever you get your podcast. But the question that we are looking at tonight, honestly, it's kind of a throwaway question. It's kind of no big deal. Like, honestly, I don't even know why we're looking at it. The question that we're talking about tonight is, what is the meaning of life? Who am I? What am I doing here? Not just like at 5:26 on a Sunday night, but like bigger question, like who am I and what am I doing here? Like in the scheme of life. That is the question that we are looking at tonight. And as I was preparing for the message today, I did you guys a favor kind of this week as I was preparing. I decided to go ahead and ask the internet, just typed into the search bar there, what is the meaning of life? Well, guys, let me just tell you, don't do that. You can just save yourself that time. I'm never getting that time back, by the way, that I spent there, having the internet tell me all sorts of ridiculous opinions about what various so-called experts might think the meaning of life is. 1 Corinthians 3:19 says that the wisdom of humans is foolishness to God, and that is proved daily on the internet. So don't do that. If you want to know what the meaning of life is, and who doesn't, right? Who among us isn't kind of thinking about this higher order, first level question? Truly, what am I doing here? What's that all about? And if we want to get to the bottom of that, we have to go to the origin story. We're going to have to go back to Genesis. We did this a couple of weeks ago when we asked, honestly, what is the first part of this question? The first part of this is, how did we get here? How did we get here? So we answered that question. We looked at Genesis. We allowed the text to be exactly what it is, no more, no less. We didn't ask the Bible to do something that the Bible was never intended to be able to do. We take the Bible seriously in this. And however you land on the specifics of how we got here, what we discovered by taking a good hard look at that question was we discovered that God spoke and God did it and God was leading and God was in charge of the whole thing. Our creator God, who is always creating, always moving things forward, always bringing people together, always pouring out his love and his grace. That's what we learned about in the first week when we were answering the question of how did we get here. Then in the second week, last Sunday was an important day in the church calendar. It's Baptism of our Lord Sunday. And so we've gotten in this tradition at Hope during Baptism of our Lord Sunday where we just open up baptisms for anyone. And so in light of the fact that we were made on purpose by a creator, and this creator has a call on us and knows us by name, we discovered that he pours out his grace on us, an unending supply of grace and mercy that our Creator gives to us. And so you heard in the Hope 360, there were over 600 people who were baptized, and over 160 of those were first-time baptisms just here in West Des Moines. Friends, that is a whole church that came forward and experienced God's grace and his mercy through the waters of baptism. That's incredible. And I hope that we would never, ever, ever take that for granted, that that's the way that God is moving and the things that God is up to here in us and through us and among us. So in light of all of that, In light of the fact that we are created on purpose by a creator who knew what he was doing, and that he lavishes us with his mercy and his grace and his forgiveness and his love, in light of all that, what's our response? What is the meaning of any single one of us being here? And so to get to the answer to that question, like I said, we have to go back to the origin story. We have to go back to the beginning. So we're going to start here in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. This might be one of my favorite passages in the entire Bible, because when we understand this passage, it's going to help us make a whole lot of sense of any of ourselves and the ways that we are the way that we are in some cases. Genesis chapter 2, verse 7 says, "Then the Lord God formed the man from the dust of the ground. He breathed the breath of life into the man's nostrils, and the man became a living person." Now, as we talked about answering the question the first week, how did we get here? I don't need you to get too caught up in the details of what and how might have happened here. What I want you to understand is that human beings received something of God, his breath, his spirit. Every human being ever has received this spirit. This is what the scriptures want us to know, is that every single one of us, whether we know who God is or not, every single human being is walking around with a human-sized portion of God's spirit within them. And here's what that means for us. That means that the thing that is within you that desires to matter to the world, the thing that is within you that desires to leave a legacy, to create something, to build something, to draw things together, to serve other people, to love other people well, to have empathy for other people, to do something that matters, that has an impact. You have that because you have within you a human-sized portion of God's spirit and God's personality. And those are the things that God is always doing. God didn't finish with creation and say, well, okay, I guess I'm done with that. He's continuing to create, continuing to drive forward, continuing to draw us together, continuing to pour out his grace and love. He is always doing those things, and that is why you have that drive within you to matter in some way. I don't know what that looks like for you. It comes together with your wiring, your personality, your interests, your gifts that are all given to you by God, by the way. But all of that comes together, and the way that you long to matter in the world probably has something to do with those unique things about you and your family and the people that you love. Now, it's important for you all to know that. The reason I want to drive that home so hard and make sure that you understand that is for so many of us, when we think about those drives and those longings that we have to leave that mark, to make an impact, to matter to the world, when we think about those things, so often we are told that those things are just a result of pride and sinfulness that's within us, that we want to do something great, we want to be great, we want to bring all the attention on ourselves. And it is true that we live in a fallen world. That is absolutely true. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And so for each one of us, that drive is tinged a little bit by sin. As I said, we're going to talk about that. But fundamentally, that drive is given to you by your Creator. Because that is what our Creator does. Our Creator matters to the world all around us. And once we figure out that thing that's in us that longs for meaning, that looks for meaning, we can understand where it comes from, and then we can begin to understand why we were given that, as it feeds directly back into our purpose. Now, as I said, sin is a reality in the world. And if it wasn't for sin in the world, because we can read in John chapter 10, verse 10 here, where Jesus says that it is the thief's purpose to steal and kill and destroy. And so that drive that is within you, that is given to you by God to matter, to leave a legacy, to have empathy, to share, to create, that has also then been twisted by sin. And so if it wasn't for sin, any single one of us would know that that drive within us is drawing us to God. We would know that like is reaching out to like, and we would know that we were supposed to go to God to have that need quenched and to have that fulfilled. We would understand that, except for the fact that sin is in the world. And when I talk about sin, I'm not talking about the individual things that any of us may or may not do, the ways that we sin in thought, word, and deed. I'm not talking about that, although those things matter. the kind of sin that I'm talking about is just the reality that we live in a fallen world and sin is all around us. And we don't even realize that that is the atmosphere or the milieu, if you will, a fancy word for a Sunday night, but we don't realize that that is the status of us walking around. You know how you get nose blind to things, how like if you don't smell your house anymore because you're nose blind to it, but if you want to know how your house smells, invite somebody else to come over and have them tell you, because they're not nose blind to your house, right? We get nose blind to certain things. In the same way, we get sin blind to the reality that that's just the air that we breathe, that it's fallen. That Jesus has conquered sin and death, but we are waiting for Jesus to come back and fix it once and for all. And so anything that God intended for good, sin is trying to twist and destroy and steal from us, because that's just a reality of life this side of heaven right now until Jesus comes back to make it right once and for all. And so the drives that we have, the longings that we have, the desire to matter, to leave an impact, to share, to serve, all of those things, they get twisted. And what ends up happening most of the time for us is that we twist that and we end up, instead of asking then what God's purpose might be through any one of us, what it is that God is trying to accomplish through us because he gave us that portion of his Spirit, instead we turn it inward, we make it a little more prideful, a little more self-focused, and the question that we end up asking is, what is my life purpose? My life purpose. What's going to bring me meaning? What's going to bring me value? What's going to make me feel like I am doing the thing that I am supposed to do in order to feel a sense of fulfillment in this world? And when we are asking this question, what is my life purpose? The next thing that happens is we tend to get it very much confused then with all of the things that we do and all of the things that we achieve. If there are any of you who are here in this room who are facing retirement or have recently just gone through retirement, I know one thing that I talk with people about often is how difficult that is to go from understanding exactly what you're going to do every day, because the milieu that we live and work and breathe in tells us that what we achieve matters so much more than who we are. I also know this because of the age of my kids and the stages that they are in. I have 4 kiddos, and the oldest one works as a choir teacher in Sioux City at Sioux City North High School and is doing really well there. My second daughter, now the next 3 have graduated this year or will graduate. So my second daughter goes to University of Iowa. She'll graduate in May. My third daughter just finished up at DMAC and just moved out last weekend, moved out of the nest. Isn't that incredible? Don't get too excited for me though, because the one who graduates from Iowa in May is moving back home, okay? So we're just a revolving door right now of people and their stuff, and that's totally fine. Because my son is there too. I can't get rid of my son yet. He's in high school, and he is also going to graduate in May. And so there's all these things that are happening, and whenever they find themselves talking with adults, there is only one question that adults know how to ask them, and the question that the adults only know how to ask is this: what's next? What are you gonna do? And listen, I get it. I totally get it. Because obviously, a bow is being put on a season, right? God is closing a door and opening a window, whatever the expression may be. Like, there is something here that is coming to a close. And so I understand why that question gets asked. But my goodness, I could talk about this forever. Like, no wonder our kids, are stressed out. What an incredible thing. What are you going to do? Where are you going to find your purpose? How are you going to continue on these next few years of your life when now you have to make the decision of what you're going to do? What if instead of asking them what's next, I want to help you? Here's what I encourage you to do. When you find out they're graduating, you say, congratulations, that is really exciting. Tell me, what's one thing that you're excited about after graduation? Because then if they want to tell you that all they want to do is sleep, you've just opened the door for them to be able to do that, right? And I think that they should be able to get a couple of good nights' rest before they figure it out that adulting is not anything that they thought it was going to be before they wake up to that cruel surprise, right? Who we are is so much more important than what we do. But because of the atmosphere that we live and move and breathe in, we forget that so often, that the point of life, the point of growing and growing closer to God and getting to know God, all of that actually is found in who we become. not what we do, but who we are. And we know that this is God's value, that this is something that God takes very seriously for us, because when the Pharisees went to Jesus, let's see, can I go back? I got a little aggressive. There we go. When the Pharisees went to Jesus and said, Jesus, what is the most important commandment? What they were asking Jesus was an achievement question. What do we do? And Jesus answered them with a relational answer. You love. Let's understand something about the commandments, first of all. We understand that God gave these commandments to Moses when the Israelites were leaving their slavery in Egypt, and they were going to have to learn how to live together and get along with one another. And they had never had to come up with their own rules. They had been slaves in Egypt. They did what they were told every single day. And now they were going to have to figure out, they had some freedom. They were going to have to figure out how to use it. And so God gave these commandments to Moses that start with, first of all, let's get straight who God is. Remember who God is. Don't turn to idols. Remember who God is. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. Remember your Sabbath. Remember to love God. Remember to worship God. That's first and foremost. And then after all of that, then love one another. These are the commandments that God gave to Moses for his people when they left their slavery, and they were going to have to figure out life now. So in addition to being commandments and things that we think about as rules and commandments that we need to obey, we can also think of the commandments honestly as how to function best as a human being. We can think about the commandments as the user manual for how to be human. First way to be human and be successful at it is love God. Figure that out. Figure out how to honor God in your life. And then after that, when you are honoring God and God is pouring his love into you, then the next thing that will automatically flow from that will be how you love the world around you. These are the commandments, yes, but they are the user manual. They are how to be successful at being a human being. And so when Jesus was walking the earth and he was living and he was teaching and he was preparing people for what was going to be coming and opening hearts and healing and bringing the kingdom of heaven to earth and all of the things that he did, this reality that who we are is so much more than what we do, so much more important than what we do. Jesus hit this over and over and over again because we understand that when we are loving well, it starts relationally. It starts in our heart, at the core of our being, and then it flows out of us. We know that. If we are loving well, if we are loving God and God is filling us with love, and we are loving our neighbor as ourselves, then we understand that there are particular actions that are involved in that. But Jesus always, every single time, wanted his followers and hearers to know that it starts with what's going on in here. And that's why loving God is so important, because only God can fill up what's going on in here so that then you can love the world around you. And the reason that Jesus was so hard on the Pharisees was because the things that they did to fill their time, their employment, their career, was religious employment, except for that they had forgotten the love. They had forgotten the love. They were focused on what we do, not who we are in the interior of our heart, where God pours into us and gives us his love and his grace and his mercy. They had forgotten that part. And so because the religious leaders were not able to open themselves to love, and they were not able to open themselves up to what it is that Jesus was saying to them, so Jesus went out and he found fishermen and he found tax collectors and he found outsiders and he found notorious sinners who were able to do a better job than the religious leaders were at loving God and loving people. This is why, this reality here is why what you do is a detail. Whether you spend your time at a career, whether you spend your time volunteering, whether you spend your time with hobbies, no matter how it is that you spend your time, none of those ways that you spend your time are as important as the motivation and the heart behind those things, whatever they may be. There are people all the time who come to a pastor here or come to talk to our care team, and they are trying to figure out, am I doing the things in life that are honoring God? Am I doing the things that God wants me to do? And often, It has to do with a career. Maybe there's a job offer on the table and they're trying to figure out if they're supposed to take that job offer. Or maybe it's just, I don't know, I feel like I'm called to go deeper, whatever that looks like. How am I supposed to do that? What am I supposed to do? And sometimes when they're trying to decide what it is that God might want them to do, usually, again, it's a career-focused type of situation. They'll be, just so bold as to say, like, Pastor, what do you think I should do? And the truth of the matter is, what I think, or what any of us pastors might think, is completely irrelevant. What matters is, in what you are doing, are you able to love God and love people? Because there are people who are in religious employment who get this wrong, and there are people who are tax collectors who get this right. What you do doesn't matter as the heart with which you do it. Now, to be clear, if what you do through your career or your hobbies or your pastimes, whatever those may be, if any of those things are requiring you to steal or lie or cheat or any of those things, you should stop doing that, just to be clear, okay? That's really important. But outside of those kind of, unique categories, I don't even know, whatever they would be, outside of that, the question isn't, am I doing what God is calling me to do? The question is, am I loving God and am I loving others well in this place where I find myself right now? Am I loving God? Am I loving others well in the place where I find myself right now? I don't know why, but there are some people who have had a very specific call placed on their life that they know that God has told them they are supposed to move to this city, they are supposed to work in this field. They understand that God is going to put those pieces together because for whatever reason, God has put a very specific call on their life. That happens for some people, but for most of us, it's so much quieter than that. For most of us, it's the reality that we find ourselves wherever we've been planted. And we didn't feel like we got a word from the Lord on that. It's just, this is where we are. This is what we do. And yet, even if that's us, we are absolutely still called to love God, love other people. That is the only way to satisfy that drive within you that you have, whether it's a big call in your life or whether it's a small one. Some of you might be sitting here today and you might be wrestling with a decision that has to do with a city or a career or any of those types of things. That's how you balance that out. Some of you might be sitting here today, and it's not a big thing, but maybe there's somebody who has been asking you for help, and you've kind of been putting it off. Maybe there's a phone call that you know that you need to make, but you haven't really wanted to. Maybe there's an apology you need to extend. Maybe there's an apology you need to accept. Maybe there's somebody in your life that you continue to try to get them to do the things you believe they are supposed to do, the things they should do. Maybe there's somebody in your life that the best way you could love them would just be to continue to pray for them, but to leave the decisions they're making up to God, between them and the Holy Spirit. Maybe you trying to get them to change their ways hasn't actually been the loving thing to do for them. What you do is not nearly as important as who you are. And if you want to figure out how to work at the top of your game, who you are is found by loving God, allowing Him to fill your heart so that you can then share it with the world around you. This is why Paul writes, whatever you do, work willingly at it as though you are working for the Lord rather than people. Remember that the Lord will give you an inheritance and that the master that you are serving is Christ. Remember that in everything you do, it is very much not important what it is that you're doing. What is important is that you do it as though you are working for the Lord, understanding that loving God and loving people always takes precedence over the thing it is that you are actually doing. There's a parable that Jesus told in Matthew 25, and it's the parable of the talents and the master. And the master's going away for a while, and he leaves his servants with, in this case, it's money. And he tells them to manage this money for him while he's gone. And he comes back, and a couple of the servants have done exactly what they were supposed to do. They understood what their gifts were. They understood what their resources were. They understood the assignment, and they multiplied those gifts. That's what God does every single time. When we use the resources, the talents, the tools that He has given us in alignment with loving Him and loving the world around us, God actually does the multiplying. That's the really cool part in this parable. God actually does the multiplying. And when you are working at life, using your tools and resources and gifts in the way that you are uniquely wired to love God and love people, you are doing that as though you were working for the Lord, keeping in mind that what all of us are looking for when we do that is for the Master to come to us at the end and be able to say to us, well done, well done. You understood the assignment. You were faithful in all those things. You weren't perfect in all those things. That's never been the call, but you were faithful. You understood the meaning that your life was created to have, to use the things that you care about, your gifts, your talents, to love God and to love the world around you. Well done, good and faithful servant. When you start to live like this, as though this is what you are looking for from Jesus at the end of our days, you are going to find all of a sudden that things that maybe didn't make sense before are going to start to make sense to you. You are going to find that when you are functioning according to your owner's manual, according to the instructions that we've been given, you are going to find that things in your life miraculously are going to start working a little bit better than they did before when you were completely ignoring the owner's manual and doing whatever it is that you wanted to do for your own selfish purposes, right? It doesn't mean that life is going to smooth out. It doesn't mean that God is going to take away some of the difficult things that every single one of us is going to deal with. But when you are no longer just obeying, but you are living at the fullness of what you were created to do and who you are created to be, you will find that God will show up for you in ways that you could never have imagined. I can promise you this, no matter what, if you are living in alignment with the meaning of life to love God and love people, I promise you, you will never be bored. You will never be bored. It may not be easy, but you will also find that God will show up for you in ways that you need him to. You might not get the recognition of human beings that maybe you've been looking for in your life, but God will show up and meet you there and give you exactly what you need to do the assignment, whether it's big or whether it's small, to do the things that he has uniquely called you and created you and designed you to do. Every single time. This weekend, as you know, tomorrow, we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We celebrate his birthday. We observe the life that he lived. And Dr. King was certainly someone who had a very unique, very specific, very much such a time as this call placed on his life. And Dr. King, what he cared about and what he understood was that every single human being had been given this breath of life that God gave to human beings. And so for anyone to be treated as though they were not made in God's image, for anyone to be treated as though they did not matter, as though they were not someone who was dearly loved by Christ, Dr. Martin Luther King understood that that was unacceptable. And it was his life's call, and it was his life's work to address this injustice that was happening in the world around us. And so I have a video that I want to show you that kind of sums up Dr. King's story. It's 2.5 minutes, but it is not maybe the usual Martin Luther King Jr. Video that you might be used to seeing. This features a YouTube personality. This young man's name, his YouTube personality is Kid President. And so he talks about Dr. King in a very kid-like way, which I think is really helpful for all of us to understand. So I enjoyed this video and I wanted to share it with you, so take a look.
Once upon a time, there's a man named Martin Luther King Jr. It's funny to think about because now we know his name so well, but at one time he was just a kid. Like maybe you're a kid watching this. Well, he was a kid too. Well, maybe you're a grown-up. That's okay too. Former kids are welcome here. I don't discriminate. Martin Luther King grew up to be a great man, of course. But things weren't all that great in the world while he was growing up. Not everybody was treated like they were somebody. And I believe that you should treat everybody like it's their birthday. But they didn't do that. People looked at the color of their skin. And that's how they decided if they were friends or not. Not cool, man. That didn't make him feel good. That didn't make anybody feel good. But his parents helped him grow up. He went to church. He learned about love. He grew up to be a minister to help a lot of people. He did all sorts of cool stuff. He helped a lot of people learn about love too. But still, he looked around and said, things should be better. He wanted to change things, so he did stuff. He decided, instead of spreading the hate, he would spread the love. He wanted to bring people together. Where people were hurting, he stepped in to help. He marched with them. He walked with them. He walked arm in arm with everyone. Sometimes it didn't go well, but he kept going. Sometimes he ended up in prison, but he kept going. Some people didn't like him, but he kept going. Some days were hard, but he kept going. Love does that, it just keeps going, even when things are dark. And, well, I don't like this part of the story, but things did get pretty dark. Someone who didn't agree with him shot him. He died in April 1968. Now, kid president, why are you telling us this sad story? Come on. I know, I'm sorry, but it happened. I don't like that happened. Now, I gotta tell you something. When things aren't awesome, it can be tough. And things won't always be awesome, but your response can be. Martin Luther King's response? It was awesome. Today, I just wanted us to think about this. Isn't it cool that we can change things? Like any of us, anybody. He dreamed and he changed things. And he dreamed and he kept sharing his dreams. They became not just his dream, a lot of people's dream. Like this one. I have a dream that little black boys and black girls will join hands with white boys and white girls and become sisters and brothers. That's a pretty good dream. Let's dream like that. That could change things.
There's a lot of, yeah, absolutely. There's several really simple, but I think profound little things the kid president said in there. And one of the things that he says in referring to Dr. King, he wanted to change things, so we did stuff. I like that. And as we talked about how it's not what we do so much as who we are, but here's the reality of the situation. The things that we do things all the time, and they will flow out of who we are. That's why it starts in here. That's why it starts with the heart that is seeking out God, loving God, and allowing God to fill us up, because we are going to act, we are going to do things. Whatever those things may be. So it's important that the ways that we act flow out of a heart that is filled with love. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, "Blessed are the peacemakers, those who work for peace." And my friends, being a peacemaker is very different from being a peacekeeper. Because a peacekeeper looks around, and a peacekeeper sees things that are neither safe nor popular, and decides not to say or do anything because they want to go along to get along. They want to go along with the flow. They don't want to make waves. That's a peacekeeper. A peacemaker is very different. Because a peacemaker looks for the ways that injustice is being done. A peacemaker looks for the ways that another human being is being treated as though they do not have God's Spirit within them, or another human being might be treated as though they are not someone for whom Christ was willing to die. A peacemaker looks at that and says, this is unacceptable. We cannot live like this. This is not the dream that God has for his creation, for anyone to be treated as though they are any less than anyone else. Blessed are the peacemakers. Dr. King was absolutely a peacemaker. And you might understand just from thinking about all these things that being a peacemaker doesn't necessarily make one very popular. Because the world doesn't always appreciate seeing love as it actually is. The world would like to see love be something different, maybe something that's yelling and shouting, something like that. But what love actually does, who love actually is it fights injustice. It sees the things that are wrong, in the world, wants to change things. So it does stuff. The next thing that kid president said that I really appreciate, he says, love just keeps going. Love just keeps going even when things are dark. 1 Corinthians tells us love never fails. Love never gives up. Love keeps going even when things are dark. This young man who is kid president, his real name is Robbie, and he made these videos when he was about 9 or 10 years old. I want you to understand that this kid knows a thing or two about things being dark. He has a condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, which is known as brittle bone disease. So by the time this young man was 10 years old, he had had over 70 broken bones. This kid hardly spent a day of his life where he did not have a cast on himself. And the reason he makes these videos is because he's adopted, he has older siblings, and so he has an older brother-in-law. And his older brother-in-law was so inspired by him and just his spirit and the fact that nothing could get this kid down. And the way that he would be in a cast at a doctor's office and he would be cracking up the doctors and the nurses and the people who were there to care for him. He was there to shine a light into the darkness wherever he could, because that was just his personality. And so his brother-in-law helped him make these videos so that other people would be able to experience the light that little Robbie brought into the world. This young man now is in his 20s. He's studying to be a physical therapist. I imagine that Robbie probably spent more time around physical therapists in his life than probably anybody else sitting in this room, unless you happen to be one. And he has discovered that while he lived a life where he made videos and he shared and put these things out for the world and loved in kind of big ways, his decision then for his career, what he wanted to do was he wanted to love in the small ways, one-on-one with people who he would meet every single day, who he could look them in the face and he'd be able to say, I understand that you're hurting. I understand that this is hard, but you can do this. He could be that light. He could be that encouragement to the world around him. Big ways, small ways. It doesn't matter so much what we do. It matters so much more how we love. Dr. King said, one of his most famous quotes, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Only love can drive out hate. It is only love that will be able to do the things in this world that so desperately and sincerely need to be done. Darkness won't be able to do that. Shouting won't be able to do that. Insisting that you're right won't be able to do that. None of those things. Only love will be able to do that. The love that starts with God's love in each one of us and then flows out of us into the world around us. Dr. King said that anybody can be great because anybody can serve. And so if we want to satisfy that desire that we have, that desire to matter, that desire to leave a legacy, the desire to do something important, the desire to share with the world around us, the desire to make something better, all of those things, if we acknowledge that that is the desire that we have, then this book points us in every single direction to the reality that the only way we are ever going to understand that desire is to go to the one who created us, the one who gave us something of himself, the one who was crucified, because that was the better option to our Creator and his Son than to be separated from us. If we want to understand our purpose, it is in loving, receiving God's love, being filled with it, and then sharing it with the world around us. This may not make you popular. Jesus was not necessarily popular when he insisted that we love one another. You might be rejected when you do this. People rejected Jesus. You might be misunderstood when you do this because people misunderstood Jesus. That's okay. He has died for us, and therefore he has taken care of the thing that we cannot take care of ourselves. He has answered the question of our sin and our death, so we truly have nothing to fear. Just because the world doesn't necessarily like it when we love well doesn't mean it isn't worth doing. It absolutely is, and we know that from every single word in this book and the way that Jesus loved and served us. So my encouragement for you this week, when you leave here today and when you're thinking about what is the meaning of life, this first order question, when you're thinking about how God has created you and the talents and the gifts and the tools and the resources that you have and the desire that you have to leave an impact, to leave a legacy, when you think about the ways that God is drawing you closer to him so that you can be filled with his love and you can love God back, and when you think about the ways that God might be calling you to love in the world around you, I just encourage you to take that step. The big ways, maybe you're called to a big way, I don't know, but most of us are just called to small, everyday things, loving well in the midst of whatever circumstances we have been placed into. If we can get that right, then we might be surprised what God calls us to after that. You are going to make mistakes. I want you to understand that. You are going to make mistakes. None of us is going to be able to love perfectly, but the thing that this book tells us is that it's not our mistakes that last forever. It's not our mistakes that last forever. The things that last forever are faith and hope and love. 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 You were created by love. You were created in love. You were created for love. You were created to share it. So it's love, okay? It's just love. All right, got it? Love. Let's stand up, let's sing, and we'll go home.